Hey, what's up, people? Pizowell here, and today I want to talk to you guys about 1988's The Blob. Now, this is partially going to be a review of the movie, as well as a review of this new Scream Factory Collector's Edition Blu-ray release for the film. And I was so excited when I first heard that Scream Factory was releasing a Collector's Edition Blu-ray release for this film. I've loved this movie going all the way back to the very first time I rented it on VHS as a kid. I was blown away by the makeup effects in this film as a kid, and I'm still pretty much blown away by the makeup effects in this film today. Of the three big 80s horror movie remakes, I'm talking about John Carpenter's The Thing, David Cronenberg's The Fly, and of course, Chuck Russell's The Blob. The Blob is the one that always has kind of flown under the radar. However, of the three, and this is no disrespect to The Fly or to The Thing, I mean, my God, John Carpenter's The Thing is probably the greatest remake ever. It's a movie that easily, at least in my opinion, surpasses the original. It's just such a freaking awesome movie. But of the three, The Blob is easily the movie that I reach for and rewatch the most often, because from beginning to end, The Blob is just a great time. It's such a fun, thoroughly entertaining, awesome freaking movie. Oh, I hardly know where to begin when it comes to breaking down this movie and how much I love virtually every aspect of this film. I love the setting. I love the fact that the film is set in this very small kind of Americana type little town. I love the cast of this film. Kevin Dillon, his mullet, which, my God, that was a great 80s mullet. That mullet should have had its own credit in the film. You've got the lovely Shawnee Smith here. You've got Donovan Leitch. You've got, just from top to bottom, a really strong cast of really well-written and fleshed out characters. Kevin Dillon is the traditional kind of bad boy prodigal son he's a bad boy, but he's got a heart of gold. Shawnee Smith is the girl next door. Donovan Leitch is the all-American high school jock. And the movie does an excellent job of setting Donovan Leitch's character up as the Steve McQueen character from the original Blob. You see him and you just think, okay, this is our hero. This is going to be the guy at the end of the movie standing next to Shawnee Smith, triumphant over the Blob, right? Wrong. Not only do they take him out in the first act of the film, but the way that they take him out. Still, when I see that effect today, that effect blows away anything digital. I don't care how big the budget. That practical effect of the Blob blobbing Donovan Leitch's character is better than any digital effect any budget can buy. The screenplay was written by Chuck Russell and Frank Darabont. It's just such a well-written film. Again, all the characters are really fleshed out. The dialogue is fantastic. The movie feels very much grounded in reality, but with those great B-movie creature feature type elements that just, it's the kind of movie that it's almost as if it's kind of not wanting you to take it seriously at certain moments, and then it hits you with a practical makeup effect like the death of Donovan Leitch that's just like a slap in the face to let you know that anything goes when it comes to this movie. The pacing is spot on. The cinematography is fantastic. The music is fantastic. The editing is fantastic. This is just overall a really, really well-made, finely tuned movie. And then you get to the makeup effects in this film. Now, there are some optical effects in the Blob that haven't quite aged so well. There's quite a few of them that still look really good today, but it's the practical makeup effects in this film that are just jaw-dropping. When you see a character who's been blobbed breaking down inside the Blob or being absorbed by the Blob, being digested by the Blob, whatever you want to call it, it's jaw-dropping. It's absolutely jaw-dropping. And those effects, in my opinion, have only gotten better over time. And the blob itself looks awesome. It has this organic look and feel to it because there was actually a blob there. Now, granted, it was like a blanket a really big blanket that they'd drawn veins on and basically had covered in slime, but it felt organic because it was there. It's not something that was computer generated and just looks completely awful. And every time you see it in the movie, it just reminds you that this is some computer generated thing that's not really there and is not really a threat and just looks like crap. This movie has it all. It's got action, it's got suspense, it's got horror, it's got B-movie cheesiness, it's got great characters, it's got great practical effects. From beginning to end, The Blob is just such a fun, thoroughly entertaining, awesome movie. It's the kind of movie that they just don't make anymore. And I'm so happy that this film has finally got an official Blu-ray release. And I'm happy to say that Scream Factory did it right. Scream Factory really rolled out the red carpet for The Blob and has given us, the fans of this movie, a Blu-ray release that is just a must own. First, let's check out the presentation. The slipcase for this release comes with some very nice, newly commissioned artwork for the film. Yeah, very, very nice. Inside the slipcase, the sleeve also features a newly commissioned artwork. However, on the reverse of the sleeve, we have the original poster art design for The Blob. As far as the picture quality and sound quality are concerned, the back of the Blu-ray doesn't indicate any kind of elaborate new restoration or transfer of the film. Still, I thought the picture quality on this release looked really, really good. I would give it a solid 4, if not a 4.5 out of 5. Same with the audio quality. I listened to the film with both the DTS HD Master 5.1 as well as the 2.0, and I thought both of the audio tracks sounded absolutely fantastic. I would give the audio a solid 4 or a 4.5 out of 5 for this release. So we've got great picture quality and great audio quality on this release. As far as extras are concerned, first up, we have It Fell from the Sky and I Killed the Strawberry, a 2-part interview with director Chuck Russell. Part 1 is 22 minutes and 26 seconds in length. Part 2 is 26 minutes and 32 seconds in length. Mr. Russell discusses his earliest creative outlets as a playwright, his work in the theater, being inspired by comedy and improv. He discusses moving to LA, meeting Frank Darabont, and the two becoming writing partners. He discusses his very brief stint as a stuntman and working his way up to becoming an assistant director and working on Hell Night as an executive producer. He discusses trying to get the Blob set up at New Line. He was rejected but offered the opportunity to co-write and direct Nightmare 3. He discusses volunteering at a halfway house for suicidal teens prior to making Nightmare 3. He discusses what he learned from working with Bob Shaye and how The Mask was originally intended to be a horror film, but he talked Bob Shaye into making it a comedy instead. Mr. Russell discusses his working relationship with Frank Darabont and how the two wrote together. He discusses The Blob, the actual Blob, not being easy to direct and quite difficult to work with. He discusses casting the film, Kevin Dillon, Shawnee Smith, Donovan Leitch, Jeffrey DeMunn, and so on. He discusses the special effects in the film and how they were achieved. He discusses the film not getting much of a marketing presence, the film's legacy, and much more. A very, very nice interview with director Chuck Russell. Next up, we have Work to Do, an interview with actor Jeffrey DeMunn. It's 14 minutes and 13 seconds in length. Mr. DeMunn discusses being unhappy with his course of study in college and wanting to give acting a shot. He discusses his first taste of working in television and in film. He discusses getting cast at the last minute for The Blob. He discusses working with Candy Clark and shooting on location in Louisiana and more. Very nice interview with Mr. DeMunn. Next up, we have Minding the Diner, an interview with actress Candy Clark. It's 16 minutes and 40 seconds in length. Ms. Clark discusses growing up poor in Texas. She discusses having success as a model, getting work as an extra before getting cast in larger roles. She discusses her character's demise in The Blob and how that scene was achieved. She discusses working with Chuck Russell and more. Next up, we get They Call Me Mellow Purple, an interview with actor Donovan Leitch Jr. It's 15 minutes and 21 seconds in length. Mr. Leitch discusses growing up in Hollywood and being a fan of 70s and 80s horror films. He discusses being a bit of a recalcitrant youth and because of that, his mother enrolled him in drama classes, and he discovered a love of performing because of that. He discusses getting cast in The Blob, working with Chuck Russell, his character's demise, and the makeup effects required for that sequence, and more. Next up, we have Try to Scream, an interview with actor Bill Moseley. It's 18 minutes and 38 seconds in length. Mr. Moseley discusses growing up in rural Illinois, loving rock and roll and horror movies. He discusses getting taken to watch The Blob by his grandmother and how it freaked him out as a kid. Mr. Moseley discusses the series of events that led him to being cast as Soldier Number 3, although he's listed as Soldier Number 2. In the credits, not Soldier Number 3. He discusses working with Chuck Russell, what he learned from his small role in the film, how cool it was to be in a remake to a film that scared him so much as a kid, and more. Next up, we have Shoot 'Em, an interview with cinematographer Mark Irwin. It's 18 minutes and 10 seconds in length. Mr. Irwin discusses some of the difficulties that arose when shooting The Blob. He discusses working with Chuck Russell. He discusses Steve McQueen's son being offered the lead role in the film, but turned it down, and more. Next up, we get I Want That Organism Alive, an interview with Blob mechanic Peter Abramson. It's 12 minutes and 23 seconds in length. Mr. Abramson discusses being inspired by The Empire Strikes Back and Cinefix magazine to get into the special effects field, going to USC, getting a gig to help out with the effects on The Blob, and eventually becoming the Blob mechanic. He discusses how messy it was to make the Blob work, to make it move and undulate, and make it look blobby. He breaks down several effect sequences in the film and how they were achieved, and more. Next up, we have Gardner's Grue Crew, behind the scenes on The Blob. It's 28 minutes and 18 seconds in length. We get behind the scenes footage of Donovan Leitch getting his face plaster casted, which looks incredibly claustrophobic and kind of creepy. We then get to witness Mr. Leitch's right arm get the plaster cast treatment. We get some test footage of a mechanical hand that appears to have been blobbed, a melting torso effect, and the guy being pulled into the kitchen sink effect. Next up, we get The Incredible Melting Man, an interview with special effects artist Tony Gardner. It's 22 minutes and 2 seconds in length. Mr. Gardner discusses getting his break working for Rick Baker on Michael Jackson's Thriller. He discusses working on Return of the Living Dead. He discusses getting hired on to work on The Blob, initially in a smaller role on the effects team, but eventually becoming the lead member of the effects crew. He discusses Donovan Leitch's character's demise, the movie theater projectionist being absorbed by the blob on the ceiling, the death of Eddie in the sewer, the imploding phone booth, and how all those effects were achieved, and much more. Next up, we have Monster Math, an interview with special effects supervisor Christopher Gilman. It's 26 minutes and 14 seconds in length. Mr. Gilman discusses how his background as a mechanic helped him get his start in the business, in props and prop design before starting his own effects shop. He discusses getting hired on to do props on The Blob and discusses some of the props he created for the film. He discusses designing the frozen, crystallized blob pieces from the end of the film, and more. Next up, we get Haddonfield to Arborville, an interview with production designer Craig Stearns. It's 20 minutes and 32 seconds in length. Mr. Stearns discusses getting interested in film while in high school in Vermont, attending USC Film School, and eventually working with John Carpenter. He discusses working as the set decorator and prop master on Halloween and The Fog. He discusses working on Just Before Dawn, One Dark Night, Children of the Corn, and The Shining miniseries. He discusses working on The Blob, including the shooting locations, the special effects, and more. Next up, we get The Secret of the Ooze, an interview with mechanical designer Mark Citrakian. It's 19 minutes and 41 seconds in length. Mr. Citrakian discusses his love of monsters going back to his childhood and how Star Wars inspired him to want to work in the film industry. He discusses getting hired to work for ILM on Howard the Duck. He discusses getting hired to work on The Blob and the unbelievable amount of work that went into that production. He discusses how The Blob was created for the film, which was essentially a large quilt covered in KY jelly and food thickener. He discusses creating the sound of The Blob, which was basically slime, the stuff you got as a kid in the little garbage cans, and more. We get theatrical trailers, a TV spot, and a still gallery. We get 3 audio commentaries, one with Chuck Russell, Tony Gardner, and Mark Irwin, moderated by Joe Lynch. The second commentary is with Shawnee Smith, moderated by Justin Beam. And the third commentary is with Chuck Russell and Ryan Turek. I listened to a little bit of the movie with all three of the commentaries. All three of the commentaries were very enlightening, insightful, and entertaining. So 3 very nice commentaries for The Blob. This is an absolutely loaded Blu-ray release from the fine folks over at Scream Factory for The Blob. If you've not seen The Blob, I highly, highly recommend it. I cannot recommend it anymore. If you've not seen the film, this Blu-ray release would be a great way to introduce yourself to the film. If you are a fan of The Blob, you definitely want to look into picking up this Blu-ray release and adding it to your collection. The picture quality and the sound quality are both fantastic. The presentation is awesome. We get a ton of extras on this release. This is a must if you are a fan of The Blob. If you've seen The Blob, please let me know your thoughts on it down in the comments section below. If you like this video, please leave it a thumbs up and share it on social media. If you're not following me on social media, those links are in the description. They're also right around here. As always, thanks so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Take care, and until next time, peace. Join the $1 a month club and help support my channel on Patreon. Thank you to my current patrons, Kevin Smythe, B-Movie Mike, Robert Sobel, Turi Delamore, Stephen Flanagan, Lori Holt, Craig Farrand, Farron Sutton, Jeremiah Lambert, Grindhouse Grotto, Derek Jana, Demon Waffles, Simon Clark, Stone Gassman, Zachary Barton, Lauren Dixon, James Welch, Eli Geisler, Jeff Overing, Pete Toll, Kyle McGuire, Jay the Stingray, Andrew McDonald, Dave Barnes, Jonathan Lundy, Chris Gonzalez, Jason Breitenbach, Brandon Bisdick, Steak Sauce, OG Myers, Mark Striano, Jeff Gardner, Travis Davis, The Obsoletionist, Chris Earls, Kevin Fitzpatrick, Randall Beatty, Joseph Hinkle, and R-Rated Horror. Say hello to the internet, Jeremy.
Hello to the internet.